Those were the horrific scenes of a plane crash minutes after it took off from the Kathmandu airport. 18 people died and the pilot was rescued. This week, we take a look at why it is becoming increasingly risky to travel by air in Nepal. Hello there, you are watching Inside South Asia with me, Dasuni Athada, and let's take a look at what we have in store for you this week. Our top story this week, 18 people were killed after a flight caught fire shortly after it took off from the Kathmandu airport in Nepal. The flight was carrying technical staff of the Saurya Airlines who were on their test flight from the country. Only the pilot survived.
Barely minutes after the 50-seat Bombardier CRJ-200 of domestic carrier Saurya Airlines took off from the Tribhuvan International Airport, tragedy struck. On its way to the resort town of Pokhara, the plane suddenly flipped rightwards and crashed into the eastern section of the airport. Nepal's aviation authority says 18 Nepalese, including one child, and a Yemeni national were on the plane. The lone survivor, the pilot of the plane, sustained injuries to his eyes and forehead, but he is said to be out of danger. An eyewitness in a nearby shop described the crash as resembling a truck overturning.
We ran after we saw the crash. The plane then hit the ground and caught fire. We were about to run to the site, but then there was an explosion, so we ran away again.
Images shared by Nepal's military showed the plane's fuselage split apart and charred. Though the airport authorities have not been able to confirm the cause of the disaster, an initial assessment said the plane had flown in the wrong direction.
WION has spoken to many officials and many engineers, and they definitely have highlighted that some of the rules have been overlooked by the Civil Aviation Authority. First being of allowing any passengers on the test flight, and in this flight we have seen 2 passengers, including a 4-year-old kid, who unfortunately have lost their lives.
Tribhuvan International Airport, the main airport in Nepal for international and domestic flights, was closed after the crash, but was reopened within hours. Considered a challenging airport for pilots, it is located inside a valley surrounded by mountains on most sides. Bigger planes are required to come through an opening on a mountain to land here. But the issue is not limited to the airport alone. For years, Nepal has been criticized for its abysmal air safety record. The mountainous country has a history of air crashes, as many airlines fly to small airports in remote hills and near peaks, often shrouded in clouds and cut off from roads. Last year, in January, Nepal witnessed its worst air crash in 30 years. 71 people were killed in January when a passenger plane went down near the tourist city of Pokhara. More than 360 people have been killed in 19 air crashes since 2000. While Nepal's aviation industry has boomed in recent years, the country has a very poor air safety record. Nepal also has some of the world's remotest and trickiest runways flanked by snow-capped peaks with difficult approaches and capricious weather. Nepal's aviation sector has been plagued by poor safety thanks to insufficient training and maintenance. The situation became so grave that in 2013, the European Union decided to ban all Nepali carriers from its airspace due to safety concerns. The question is, who is to blame? The government of Nepal has a track record of failing to act despite the innumerable air tragedies that continue to haunt the country. Over the years, successive investigations into air crashes have revealed that the crew did not follow protocol. There was insufficient flight training by airline managements and inadequate oversight by Nepal's Civil Aviation Authority. Planes in Nepal have often been tagged as flying coffins. Yet, the government chooses to look the other way. Until the next tragedy strikes and a fresh blame game begins.
The monsoon season in India brings with it a fair share of problems. Apart from surge in floods, there is another health storm that has been brewing. 3 viruses by the names of Nipah, Zika, and Chandipura have been wreaking havoc in various parts of India. Here's the story.
The death of a teenager has taken scare levels on the Nipah virus in Kerala to a new high. State officials say the boy developed fever 10 days ago and was on ventilator support. He tested positive for the Nipah virus. Then a sudden cardiac arrest and death. Alarm bells have rung out across the Malappuram region where the boy lived. 330 people, including 68 health workers who came into contact with the dead boy, are under observation. 101 are in the high-risk category. An alert has been sounded with people advised to wear masks. 25 committees have been set up for awareness and sanitation. This is the 5th Nipah outbreak in Kerala, having claimed 17 lives in 2018, 1 in 2022 and 2 in 2023. The WHO describes Nipah as a zoonotic virus, meaning it is transmitted from animals to humans. Fruit bats are the usual carriers, and humans can become infected by consuming fruit contaminated by bat saliva or urine. The symptoms: fever, headache, sore throat, etc. No missing the COVID parallels.
So we are taking samples continuously and we are sending them for tests, and we are doing the test in the state itself at Kozhikode Medical College and also at IAB, Townekal, and also the team from Pune NIV they have reached here, and they will be starting doing their tests.
Then the Zika onslaught. The virus originates in the Zika forest in Uganda. 28 cases have been recorded in Pune, Maharashtra, of 34 in all in the state. The virus breeds in stagnant water left behind by rains. The Aedes mosquito, the chief carrier, is also known to transmit monsoon viruses dengue and chikungunya. High alert has been sounded. Fogging and fumigation has been stepped up. The Zika virus assumes an even larger threat for pregnant women, with the risk of the fetus being affected and other complications. And there's no real medication. Prevention is the only way.
So any infection wherein there is a increased risk of breeding of mosquitoes is likely to go up during this particular season, and that is the reason why we are seeing a increase in the number of cases of Zika. Now, having said that, the concerns with this is basically because Zika is known to cause problem for the individual in the form of a high-grade fever with chills and rashes. However, unlike dengue and with chikungunya, from which this particular family of viruses is where Zika also belongs to, what happens in patients who are pregnant is that they could have loss of the fetus, or they can also have a condition called as microcephaly, which is a small size of the head of the baby.
Virus 3, Chandipura, after the village near Nagpur in central India where it was first found. Cases have been reported in Gujarat, Rajasthan and Maharashtra. CHPV or Chandipura viral encephalitis has caused 32 deaths in Gujarat this year. The number of confirmed cases has gone up to 84. Several species of sandflies and mosquitoes carry and transmit the virus. Symptoms extend to high fever, seizures, diarrhea, and even coma and death. Pediatricians warn it can grow from a minor fever in the morning to kidney and liver damage by the end of the day. And there's no preventive vaccine for it either. As much as they are about rain and weather, the monsoons in South Asia have frequently thrown up warnings of the health challenge too.
India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presented the country's budget for 2024 and 2025. What were the key takeaways? Was this a pro-middle class budget? Take a look to find out.
In the backdrop of Budget 2024, India's income tax landscape underwent some adjustments aimed at reshaping fiscal policies affecting middle-class taxpayers. While Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman introduced revised income tax slabs under the new regime, the Finance Minister announced marginal benefits like an increased standard deduction from Rs 50,000 to Rs 75,000, but expectations for a more substantial rise to Rs 1 lakh were unmet. This decision, alongside unchanged tax slabs in the old regime, has sparked mixed reactions among taxpayers and financial experts alike. Despite these adjustments, a significant portion of taxpayers opted for the new income tax regime in financial year 24, reflecting a preference for lower tax rates despite fewer deductions and exemptions. But when it comes to taxes, there really is no relief. While the middle class may benefit from a higher standard deduction limit, changes in capital gains taxation is bad news for investors sitting on profits. Short-term capital gains on certain assets will be taxed at 20%, and long-term capital gains increase to 12.5%, while exempting gains up to Rs 1.25 lakh annually. Mutual fund investors will also be taxed at a higher rate when they sell their holdings. The measures aim to simplify tax compliance and boost government revenue, but concerns linger over the impact on taxpayers with substantial gains from asset holdings and the shortfall of relief measures for the middle class. The corporate tax reduction from 40% to 35% aims to stimulate business growth, yet the absence of broader tax relief for the middle class remains a focal point of discussion among economists and taxpayers.
One must understand that what the government has done is that it's brought all asset classes at the same level of 12.5%. Basically, two things have been done. That is, the long-term gain tax has been kept at 12.5%. In the real estate sector, there was no indexation, but the tax was at 20%. Without indexation, now there will be no indexation, but the tax rate has been brought down to 12.5%. And over, in a day or two, the citizens will realize that this will bring in predictability, this will bring in consistency, this will bring in stability for everybody. So I think it's the right balance which has been struck amongst all asset class.
Let us look at some other hits and misses that concern the middle class. Education, job creation, and investments in precious metals like gold and silver are highlighted as wins, along with improved rail connectivity and support for religious tourism. However, there's disappointment over the absence of substantial consumption incentives and the drying up of indexation benefits for property sales. Indexation benefits in the context of property sales refer to adjusting the purchase price of an asset for inflation before calculating capital gains tax, which raises the question if investment in property is still lucrative for the middle class. Funds for promoting mobile payments have also been reduced, and allocations for enhancing air connectivity have been trimmed. Overall, while there are strides in certain areas like housing under PMAYU, the budget leaves gaps in boosting consumer spending. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has blamed her opponents for the violence that took place in the country following the job quota protests last week. While the situation in Bangladesh may be calm right now, the memories and the shock lives on. Take a look at the week that shook Bangladesh.
আজকে কারফিউ দিতে আমরা বাধ্য হয়েছি মানুষের জানমাল রক্ষা করার জন্য। তো আমি তো কখনো এটা চাইনি, কারণ আমি যখন 81 সালে দেশে ফিরে আসি প্রতি রাতে কারফিউ ছিল। আপনারা জানেন যে কটা ঘটনা, যতগুলি খুন খারাপি এই শিবির, বিএনপি, জামাত এরা একসাথে করেছে। অনেকেই শাস্তি দেওয়া হয়েছে, একবার জানি, কিন্তু শাস্তি দিয়েছে আবার জেল থেকে তারা ওই একই চেহারায়। তবে এবার অত সহজে ছাড়া হবে না।
After 1 week of turmoil in Bangladesh, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has put the blame for violence on her political opponents. Hasina's comments came a day after the country's top court scaled back most job quotas and the nation showed signs of crawling back to normalcy. A week of student-led protests against quotas for government jobs killed nearly 200 people. Clashes between protesters and security forces prompted the government to shut down internet services, impose a curfew and deploy the army. The curfew has now been lifted. There's a tense calm that says there's still an anger simmering below the surface. This was perhaps one of the worst unrests under Sheikh Hasina, who won a 4th straight term in power in January. The opposition had boycotted the elections.
Prime Minister's remarks on the whole incident and blaming us, being BNP mainly, is totally baseless. It is full of vengeance, because they have been trying always to defame BNP, which is a totally democratic party and a liberal democratic party. Unfortunately, this has become the trend of our Malik and the party leaders to blame everything for everything, BNP for everything.
There's the political blame game on one hand and real-life tragedy on the other. The scars run deep. As clashes intensified last week, foreign nationals living in Bangladesh looked for a way out. The border into West Bengal and Tripura held up hope for Indians as well as Nepalis, Bhutanese and more. Countries like Malaysia pulled out its nationals by planes. Close to 5,000 Indian nationals were moved out, most of them students.
The situation in Bangladesh is getting worse. It was horrific. Jails, factories and vehicles have been put on fire. Prisoners were burned to death. Roads were also destroyed. Buses, many other vehicles and houses have also been destroyed and torched by the protests. There is nothing left.
We were not allowed to go outside, so we stayed inside our hostels. The firing kept happening outside our hostels. Violent clashes were frequently happening between the protesting students and the police.
The Friday is the most worst because at that time all the people coming out, and then we can see that they are holding their weapon there's the meeting point there where the riots happen.
The 5-day shutdown drastically restricted information flows and upended daily life for many. Bangladesh's telecommunications ministry says broadband internet has now been restored.
As our work is international, we are fully affected by the internet shutdown. If I talk about my own situation, I'm facing a loss of around $330 every day. I was in the telecom industry for 22 years. I've never seen something like this.
Bangladeshi Army Chief General Waqar Uzzaman took an aerial survey to take stock of the devastation. In many areas, he says redevelopment will have to start virtually from scratch.
The total loss is indescribable. I don't know how long it will take to get over this loss.
Amid an economic downturn and high youth unemployment, a situation like this pushes Bangladesh to the brink. Can Sheikh Hasina put the nation back together?
And that's all we have for you for this week. Before we leave, take a look at these visuals of the Bhutanese delegation, including the country's king and prime minister, visiting Gujarat this Monday. For the WION team, I'm Dasani Athada, and we will see you next week.